Level 1 is to simply route the house mix that feeds your main PA to the live stream device. This could be done with Y cables that split the signal or by using a subgroup output that mimics the main mix. Obviously, this is the worst case scenario, as you won't be able to address the needs of each audience independently. That usually means you'll need to fully prioritize one experience over the other, or it means you'll have to split the difference and make sacrifices in each mix for the benefit of the other. With that said, here are some things you can do to improve your live stream mix, even if you're restricted to working within level 1, with the same mix feeding both the live and remote audiences. Number 1, do what you can to reduce stage volume. That could mean using an electronic drum kit, or placing the drums in an isolation booth or behind a barrier. It could mean simply playing the drums more quietly, or turning down the guitar amplifier and the other loud instruments on stage. As the stage volume decreases, you'll be able to send more elements to the speakers without overpowering the live audience. In other words, with a low stage volume, even the house mix becomes a lot more about sound reproduction than sound reinforcement. Therefore, the house mix will be more appropriate for those tuning in to the live stream. Depending on the system you're using, you could potentially take this one step further by adding in a room EQ on the PA signal path while leaving the live stream signal path unchanged. There are two basic ways to do this. Number 1 would be to place an outboard EQ just before the inputs of the amplifier, or to use the amplifier's built-in DSP, if that's an option. This EQ could be used to counteract some of the room's acoustic characteristics by cutting out some resonant frequencies, for example. And because it only affects the signal going to the room, that will allow you to use the input channel strip settings to address input-specific problems rather than room-specific problems, which will hopefully already be handled by the room EQ. Another way to do this on some mixers, including the Persona Studio Live consoles, is to use a matrix mix. You might already be familiar with Auxes mixes, which allow you to make a mix that is separate from the main mix that feeds the speakers. A matrix mix is similar, but it allows you to make a mix of mixes. Here's an analogy that my mentor shared with me. Think of the individual input channels, like kick, snare, lead vocal, etc., as passengers boarding a bus or a car. The individual passengers are like the input channels, and the individual vehicles are like the Auxes. A matrix is akin to a ferry that can transport several vehicles, a mix of mixes, a vehicle carrying other vehicles. And some matrices, including the matrices on the console I have here, can include mixes or individual channels, but I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. If you're working with a mixer that happens to have a matrix feature, you can route the main mix to a stereo matrix, which feeds your PA system, and also route the main mix to another stereo matrix dedicated to the live stream. And on this mixer, that gives you a separate EQ, delay, compressor, and limiter for each matrix. In its simplest form, this gives you the same mix feeding 2 pairs of outputs with unique processing dedicated to each destination. But level 2 takes this a step further. Let's unpack how matrices, auxes, and subgroups can be used in more advanced ways to create separate mixes for the in-house audience and the remote audience. I think the Persona Studio Live console is a perfect example for this discussion, because every mix on this mixer can be either an aux, a subgroup, or a matrix. Let me explain the differences, keeping in mind that each of these is essentially a mix that can be routed within the mixer, patched to a physical output, or patched through USB into a computer, as desired. In general, a matrix is like an aux, but you can send auxes to a matrix and can typically only send inputs to an aux. We've already covered that. The differentiating characteristic of an aux mix compared to a subgroup is that an aux mix has a variable send on each channel, allowing you to determine how much of a particular input goes to the aux mix, Meanwhile, a subgroup is usually a simple on or off switch, with the level following the channel fader. If I want to send channels to a subgroup, I go to the channel and I toggle on subgroup 1 switch, for example. And now the channel will be sent to the subgroup at the level determined by its fader. This is similar to how the main mix works. I can toggle the main mix assign button and determine the level with the channel fader. So if I wanted a channel to go to subgroup 1 and the main mix, I'd turn both switches on and use the fader. And if I wanted to send a channel to only subgroup 1 and not the main mix, I'd just toggle off the main assign switch and keep the subgroup 1 switch engaged, still controlling the level with the channel fader. But if I want to send a channel to the main mix and a separate mix at different levels, I could use an aux mix instead. Now, I determine how much I send to the main mix using the channel fader, and determine how much of that input goes to the aux mix by using the aux send. And finally, I could use a matrix to mix together a bit of each subgroup, each aux mix, a little bit of the main mix, or even individual channels. There's one more detail you should understand here: the difference between a pre and a post fader send. This determines where in the signal chain the signal is sent out to the aux or matrix you're routing it to, which is very important, so listen closely. This mixer allows you to specify where the channel send is for each aux and matrix send: pre-1, pre-2, and post. Many consoles only provide pre and post, but the additional flexibility of the sends on this console will help make those more basic options even more clear. Pre-1 places the send directly after the polarity invert, high-pass filter, and gate. So if I apply EQ or compression to a channel, those effects will be included in the main mix, but will not be included in any submix that's set to pre-1. Also, the level of the send will not be impacted by the channel fader. Pre-2 places the send after all of the channel processing, but before the fader. So any EQ or compression will be applied to both the main mix and the mixes set to pre-2. However, the fader still won't impact the level sent to the submixes. Finally, post places the send after all of it: the channel processing and the fader. This allows me to automatically reflect any changes I make to this channel in the main mix across all of the submixes that are set to post. Note that these selections are made for each mix. So if I set aux 7 to post, every aux 7 send on every input channel will be post fader.